I am cautiously optimistic that Harris is going to win this election, and I can explain why. I'll preface this by saying this is not a particularly in-depth analysis. That's why I'm using the word cautiously optimistic. Okay, so this is how I think about it. Trump won by a normal amount in 2016. He lost by kind of a small amount in 2020. But ever since he lost in 2020, everything that has happened to Trump has not been good for his image or for his coalition. He lost in 2020, and then we had January the 6th, 4 indictments, 34 felonies, liable in the E. Jean Carroll case, the end of Roe v. Wade at the hands of his Supreme Court picks, increasingly bizarre behavior at rallies, he's starting to have sundown syndrome, bumbling campaign, incoherent messaging, and now a ton of famous Republicans, and most of his cabinet is saying that they would never vote for him again. So he already was in a losing position at the end of 2020, and he's only lost more votes, right? There are people who voted for him in 2020 who are not going to vote for him in 2024 or are going to stay home in 2024. But who is a person who voted against him in 2020 and is now for him in 2024, right? If 2024 was a replay of 2020, you already would expect the Democrats to win. And if just like 5 or 10% of former Trumpers kind of stay home or vote for a different person, that's enough to give Harris kind of like a blowout victory. He was already in a losing position 4 years ago. He's only lost more people. It might not be many, but it doesn't need to be many for him to still lose. Now, there is one demographic I can think of that was not part of the Trump camp in 2020 that might now be part of the MAGA movement in 2024, and that's young white men, like podcast bros. Guys who were too young to vote in 2020, or maybe were old enough to vote but weren't old enough to be interested in 2020. And it is a fact that those guys skew Republican, but there's a couple of reasons why I don't think they're enough to offset everybody who's left Trump. Number one is those young white men only slightly skew Republican. Number two, women that same age group, young women who are just now aging into voting, are very liberal and are going to wash out any gains that the Republicans are making amongst young men. And number three, young people of any gender, but especially men, just tend to not vote. So I just don't think crypto bros are going to be enough to offset everyone who has left the Republican Party, which I don't think is very many people, but it doesn't need to be very many people to still put Trump in a losing position. However, there is still one big X factor as far as I can see it, which is turnout. Voter turnout in 2020 was abnormally huge, and I think a lot of people were there just fueled by COVID rage. I do not think it's reasonable to assume that 2024 will have the same amount of voter turnout as 2020. The Trumpers are in a cult. They will crawl over broken glass to go vote for the guy. So in my way of looking at it, it all kind of comes down to what is voter turnout going to look like in the swing states? Because there is a scenario where voter turnout is so low amongst the non-MAGA crowd in the swing states that Trump can still squeeze through. I feel pretty serene about the whole thing, I think, because I've already voted and there's just nothing I can do past that. Plus, I do not live in anywhere near a swing state. New York is as blue as they come, so it kind of doesn't have anything to do with me at this point. We'll know either way in another week or so.